There are many gods in the Elder Scrolls universe, more than you would think. You hear non-stop about the Divines, Talos, and the Daedric princes of Oblivion. But this understanding of the metaphysical, this perception of the gods, is rather imperial-centric. The 8, then 9, then 8 again Divines are a unique imperial religion that has gained purchase among many more societies outside of man since its creation. And the Daedra are less open to interpretation as they straight up talk to you and what they are about is made clear. But outside these known entities are other gods that you rarely hear about. Gods of other cultures or of times long past. What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to FudgeMuppet. My name is Scott, and recently we made a video on the topic of 7 gods that you don't hear about. But that list didn't encompass all of the gods that you don't often hear about, and this one won't either. But I have picked 7 more gods that you don't hear about, and I'll do my best to tell you about them. Remember that you may have heard of these before, but the criteria is more so gods that you don't often hear about in the games. Let's get into the gravy, starting with number 1. Fynaster, like the elven god Sura Bane, was an ancient Ultima ancestor who in death would become worshipped as a hero god by the Ultima. The Snow Elves and the Bretons also worshipped him. His worship remains on the Somerset Isles, and his feats have impacted the long lives of thousands of Ultima. Specifically, it is said that Fynaster in his wisdom developed a specific walking technique, a certain shorter walking stride that naturally allowed the Ultima to live an extra 100 years. Whether this is simply legend or fact, it is known that the High Elves are the most long-lived of the Mer, but of course, there are many exceptions, as the nature of aging with elves is not as clear as it is with the races of man. For example, Dyvaith Fyr, a Dunmer, lived over 4,000 years, and Gelebor, an ancient snow elf, has been living since his people's destruction in the Merethic era. Besides aiding the Ultima in their striving to immortality, Fynaster is known for one more thing. His artifact, the Ring of Fynaster, is part of his legacy on Tamriel. In addition to this new walking stride, this ring allowed him to live for hundreds more years. It grants the wearer resistance to shock, poison, and magic, assisting the wearer in surviving their journeys, but also the ring is cursed to eventually disappear from its holder's possession, only to be found again by another. You are of course familiar with Massa and Secunda, the giant celestial spheres that rise in the night sky. Well, while to some they may be merely the moons, or to others they may be the broken body of Lorkhan, but to the Khajiit these moons are known as Jode, the big moon god, and Joan, the little moon god. Now, with the Elsewhere DLC for the Elder Scrolls Online coming out soon, I am more than sure we will find out lots more about these moon gods, but for now, here is what we know. Joan and Jode, the 2 moon gods, directly affect the biology of the Khajiit through the lunar lattice. The different moon gods affect the forms a Khajiit will take, whether that be a small house cat like the Alfiq, a giant battle cat like the Centarat, or the typical humanoid Suthairat. So while you may only see the 2 moons, to the Khajiit they are 2 gods that shape their people. Curiously, the Bosmer are also known to worship these 2 gods. Speaking of the Bosmer, let's talk about one of their most important gods, a god that is seldom talked about unless in reference to the Green Pact. Afree, also called Zephyr, is the singer, the storyteller, the god of song and forest, the spirit of the now. Afree, to be fair, is mentioned more in the Elder Scrolls Online, however in the mainline series of Elder Scrolls games he remains largely untalked about in comparison to the other gods of Tamriel. Afree earns worship from the Ultima, Bretons, Snow Elves, and the Bosmer, but is most sacred to the Wood Elves because of how integral he is to their customs and their very homeland of Valenwood. The book Varieties of Faith has this to say about him. According to the Wood Elves, after the creation of the mortal plane, everything was in chaos. The first mortals were turning into plants and animals and back again. Then, Afree transformed himself into the first of the Elnefey, or Earthbones. After these laws of nature were established, mortals had a semblance of safety in the new world, because they could finally understand it. Afree is sometimes called the storyteller for the lessons he taught the first Bosmer. Some Bosmer still possess the knowledge of the Chaos Times, which they can use to great effect. This knowledge is their power of the Wild Hunt, where they can ritually decide to shapeshift into a horde of supernatural beasts, slaying their enemies. The Green Pact of the Bosmer is a treaty between the elves of Valenwood and the god Afree, determining that they should never harm plant life and never waste meat, resulting in a carnivorous and cannibalistic lifestyle. In return, the elves could shape their homes with magic and live in the beautiful Valenwood forests. But thousands of years have passed since that first contract, so how do they maintain the tenets of Afree? Well, priests of Afree are called the Spinners. They keep the laws and histories of their people, but they also narrate events that have yet to occur. In some ways, they could be seen as prophets. The first of the Bosmer were instructed by Afree through the power of storytelling, and the Spinners do the same, sometimes exaggerating and altering the stories for great effect, but the stories always contain the essential truths for living one's life. They have been attributed the skill of narrative magic, whereby the Spinners can change memories of past events. They are an interesting bunch, although some could say that they are spinners of propaganda. For the next god on this list, I cheated a little bit. He's kind of a god. He is, in fact, a demigod, but he is also worshipped as a cultural hero of the Imperials, so he is a demigod who is worshipped, so I'm going to include him on this list. Morahouse is the first breath of man, also known as Morahouse Breath of Kine. He is described as a winged man bull, think a minotaur with wings, and he also had a hoop ring worn in his nose. Child of Kine, he is credited with being a key figure along with Pelennor Whitestrake and Alesia in the emancipation of men from their Aelid overlords. In fact, his legacy is very closely intertwined with the First Empire of Cyrodiil. Pelennor counseled Morahouse against pursuing his love for Alesia, saying, "We are Adamor, and change things through love. We must take care lest we beget more monsters on this earth. If you do not desist, she will take to you, and you will transform all Cyrod if you do this." Morahouse rejected the advice as impossible to follow, and this resulted in the union of Alesia and Morahouse, a demigod, resulting in the very first Minotaur Balatza as their son, who also became emperor, successor to Alesia. Just as a fun mention, Morahouse also wore the artifact called the Lord's Mail, armor of unsurpassable quality, also called the Gift of Kinnereth or simply the Armor of Morahouse. Now for a confusing one. In the last video I mentioned that I was thinking of making a video reconciling all the different interpretations of the gods and just in general explaining the religions of Mundus. Well, I'm going to go ahead with that, and this god Orki is an example of the need for such explanations. You see, Orki is a confusing god, more unique than most because it isn't clear whether he is Aedra or Daedra. Here's where it gets weird. Orki, the Old Knocker, is the ancient lone god of the Nords. He is a god that combines aspects of the Aedra Arche and the Daedra Malakath. The Nords believed that once they lived just as long as the elves, but it was Orki, through heathen trickery, who forced them into a bargain that bound them to the Counts of Winters, reducing their lifespans to 6 years. But it was Shor, the mighty warrior king god of the Nords, who showed up and removed the curse, throwing it onto the nearby orcs, reducing their elven lifespans to that of a man. However, the damage of the curse on the Nords could not be totally undone, so their lifespan was around 80, that of a normal man, but the curse thrown on the orcs reduced their natural elven lifespan to that of a typical man. Some say it wasn't Orki himself who laid the curse, but it was he who summoned the ghost of Alduin to eat down the Nords to 6 years old. But regardless, it doesn't really matter. Orki is thought to be responsible for why the Nords don't live as long as the elves. For the final god on this list, we have one that has been scarcely mentioned since the days of Elder Scrolls II Daggerfall, Raymond Evanarm, or simply Evanarm. He is the Black Knight and the god of war, the protector of all warriors. He is said to ride a golden stallion named Warmaster and is accompanied by a pair of huge ravens. He is described as bearded, tall, and muscular, and as having flowing reddish blonde hair and steel blue eyes. But why the name Evanarm? Evanarm's name refers to the ebony sword fused to his right arm as a result of the wounds he suffered in titanic battles of the past, and he is never seen without a full suit of ebony armor. Emblazoned on his ebony tower shield is the symbol of a red rose, a flower known for blooming on battlefields where he appears. According to legend, he appears on the field of battle to reconcile opposing sides and prevent bloodshed. He is/was worshipped by those of the Fighters Guild, particularly in Hammerfell, and also by the Citadel of Evanarm, a religious order devoted to worshipping him. Now, the curious case of Evanarm is juicy because it seems the reason we don't often hear about this god is because he is no longer canon. The book called From the Memory Stone of Michelalechi has all the reference to Evanarm removed from it in the Elder Scrolls Online, and he has not been mentioned in a book nor spoken word since the days of Elder Scrolls II Daggerfall. It is believed that he is retconned. However, in the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, when reaching level 80, you are approached by a mysterious tall Redguard man called the Ebony Warrior, saying,
"The time has come. I have done all that can be done. There is nothing left. No quests to be undertaken, no villains to be slain, no challenges to face. Except for you. You are my last challenge. Only you can send me to Sovngarde with honor. Make your preparations. When you're ready, come find me at my last vigil."
Now, there are some very good theories out there that suppose the Ebony Warrior is in fact Evanarm, or at least an avatar of the god. However, it could be that he is merely a nod to Evanarm, a god retconned out of existence, which does seem a little bit more likely. He is a Redguard in full ebony armor. Evanarm was popular in Hammerfell, home of the Redguards, and wore a full suit of ebony as well. Having him to be a mighty warrior to challenge you also fits the bill. I'm certain it is at the very least a reference to Evanarm, but whether or not he's explicitly the god or an avatar of the god, we just don't know. As I mentioned earlier, Evanarm has an ebony sword fused to his arm and has reddish blonde hair, blue eyes, and a beard, hardly the description of a Redguard. But then again, gods can take many forms, so perhaps you do accept the challenge of a god as the last Dragonborn in Skyrim. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, 7 more gods that you just don't really hear about much. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, give it a like and do subscribe, because I will be writing the video explaining all the weird interpretations of all the gods and putting them into a format where you can all understand easily. Thanks again for watching. My name is Scott from FudgeMuppet, and I'll be back to nerd out with you again next time.